Hello, welcome everybody. This is our Funky Tea Kombucha class. We have our MFP online program. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so my name is Monica Benavides. I'll be your MC. We have our QA monitor, Nina, and our presenters for this evening, myself, and we have Marina. This program is being recorded and will be posted on our website. We will also send you this slide deck after you complete the brief post-program survey that you'll receive when you leave this Zoom. Okay, for Q&A, some Zoom housekeeping. Please keep your mics muted when not speaking. When we invite live questions, you can unmute and speak up, or you could raise your Zoom hand. You can see here in the menu, the Zoom menu, if you hit the React button, you'll have an option to raise your hand. At any time, you can submit questions or comments in writing in the Zoom Q&A feature. Open this from the menu bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Here in the green circle, it says Q&A with the question mark. If you don't see the Q&A on your bar, you can click More with the 3 dots. It will open up a pop-up menu. And here in the second green circle, you'll see that Q&A. You can select it from that pop-up menu there. And again, during the open discussion, you can just speak up.
Monica, I want to tell you, we don't actually see the slides, at least I don't.
Oh, I really appreciate you telling me that. I will go ahead and
The slides are okay.
Oh, are they?
The slides are
Oh.
okay.
I'm seeing
Okay,
them.
thank you. Then I must be my settings.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Well, let's go ahead and do that again. Okay. Great. Continuing. So, who are we? The UCMFP online program is a community outreach, online-based, grant-funded volunteer program within the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources that provides up-to-date research-based information on food safety and preservation. What is our mission? To keep Californians safe and well as they use culturally appropriate, research-based practices to safely preserve food in the home, reducing food waste, increasing food security, and providing engaging ways for Californians to explore healthy food. Little disclaimer, the views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the University of California. The University of California name and all the forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. Okay, let's go over our goals for today's program. Our goals is to prepare you to 1, safely ferment tea to make kombucha. I'll be presenting that. 2, add more fizz and flavor in a second ferment, 2F, and that will be presented by Marina. And 3, troubleshoot your process or embrace your ugly SCOBY. That will be presented by Marina. If you're wondering what a SCOBY is, we'll be presenting that shortly. Okay, so on to our first goal, safely ferment tea to make kombucha. Okay, so first things first, safety first. Be sure to keep it clean. Clean and sanitize your work area, wash your hands, and use clean equipment and supplies. So we're going to dive into kombucha and the role of the SCOBY. So kombucha is made from fermenting sweetened tea. This fermentation process is caused by microorganisms breaking down the sugars and compounds in that tea. So a SCOBY is a symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So it's basically an acronym. And they are the microorganisms that are used and produced in the fermentation process, as you will see in this presentation. Okay, so we're going to move on to our equipment and supplies. So utensils, spoons, and other utensils should be stainless steel wood, or plastic. So you do not want to use aluminum, copper, brass, galvanized or iron utensils, as these metals may react with acids and cause undesirable color or flavor changes in your kombucha. Containers. You'll need a tea kettle or pot for heating your water and brewing your tea, a brewing container for your kombucha, your wide mouth, you can use a wide mouth canning jars, stainless steel vessel, or food grade plastic. And you can also use bottles or jars for your finished kombucha. And coverings. During the fermentation process, you're going to want to keep your brew, your fermented tea covered. So you can use fine weaved cloth or coffee filters. In this photo, this is a coffee filter, and you can secure that with rubber bands to hold it in place. Some optional supplies. You can use a funnel, that can be helpful, a thermometer to monitor the room temperature, and we'll talk about the temperature of the room later. And a little tip here is you can use 2 rubber bands just in case one breaks during the fermentation process. And I speak from experience. Coming back to one of my jars, I found that the rubber band had broke and the coffee filter was loose. And so from then on out, I started doubling up on my rubber bands just in case. And I have found when I came back to a doubled up rubber band, one of them broke. I guess I got old rubber bands. And the second one was there to keep it secure. So that was helpful. So just a little tip that might be helpful for you. Okay, so moving on to our ingredients. So you can use a 1/4 cup green or black tea in a mesh bag, or 4 to 8 bags of tea bags, 1 gallon of filtered water, 1 cup cane sugar. It's important you use cane sugar. You don't want to use different types of sugar. The cane sugar is the best for that for those microorganisms. And a proper brew. 1 to 2 cups kombucha starter liquid from a previous batch. That's going to get it going. That's that starter liquid, and 1 SCOBY, the symbiotic culture of bacteria and yeast. So those are your ingredients. See them pictured here. Okay, so now we're moving on to making kombucha. So you've got all your, you've got your clean space, your clean hands, your clean materials. You got the materials that you need. You have your ingredients. So we're going to start by preparing the sweetened tea. Step 1, heat up your water. Step 2, brew your tea. Step 3, dissolve the sugar in the tea while the water's still hot. Now, of course, if you're using loose leafed tea, you're going to want to filter out those tea leaves before you combine it with your sugar. Okay. And once you have that sugar dissolved in your tea, then allow it to cool to room temperature, because your SCOBY is not going to like hot tea. Okay, so allow it to cool to room temperature, and then you'll have your sweetened tea. Okay. All right, moving on to step 5. You're going to be adding your SCOBY and that starter liquid, that kombucha from a previous batch. This can be purchased online, the SCOBY and the starter liquid. Okay, so step 5, add to your cool tea your SCOBY and unflavored kombucha starter liquid to your brewing vessel. Again, you can use a stainless steel vessel. You can use a food grade plastic. You can use a wide mouth mason jar. Okay, glass works. Okay, step 6. Cover the container with a fine mesh cloth or coffee filter. This is important because you want to keep anything out. This is going to help keep it safe from any anything that might want to get in there. So it's going to keep it safe in there. Step 7, secure with a rubber band or 2. And of course, you want to label and date the container, step 8. Okay, so we've got it all mixed together. So now what to expect during the fermentation process? How long is this going to take? At what temperature? When will it be ready? Okay, so the fermentation process. Now that SCOBY is going to start to, again, in the fermentation process, those microorganisms are going to eat up that sugar and the compounds. So that's going to take some time. Allow your tea to ferment for 7 to 10 days at about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. That'll be an optimal temperature. So you can taste it at day 7 to see if you like the taste. The longer it ferments, the longer it sits out, the less sweet it will be and the more acidic it will become. Now, this is up to personal preference. Some folks like their kombucha on the sweeter side. Some folks like it a little bit more acidic. I personally like it a little bit more acidic, but I do have friends that like it on the sweeter side. When you do taste it, you want to use a clean, pour it into something clean, or you just want to keep it very clean. If you decide this is too sweet for me, you're just going to put that you want it to ferment more, you're going to put that covering back on. If you poured a little bit out, you're going to clean off that rim with clean cloth, make sure nothing gets in there, and cover it up, secure it with that rubber band. Or here you can see that a ring, a mason jar ring was used. That works as well. Okay, so if your temperature is too warm, the bacteria may overgrow. It might not yield, it won't yield optimal flavor. And if it's too cool, the kombucha is more susceptible to mold. And again, our goal 3 will be discussing the troubleshooting. Okay, so we're going to come back to that if you have some questions there. But speaking of questions, now it's time for you to ask some questions about some of those basics. The first fermentation. So feel free to unmute. You could raise your hand. You can type your questions into the Zoom Q&A.
We did have one question, and it's a good one for everybody. And that's, where would you acquire your first SCOBY if you never made kombucha before? And it's a parallel to that. I would also say, where would you get the ready-made kombucha that you need to add to your ferment? Would you like to answer those, Monica?
Sure, and Marina, feel free to join in. You can order them online. You can order a SCOBY online, and there are various suppliers out there. We don't endorse any one particular supplier, and it will come with that starter liquid. And or an alternative is to ask a friend. I personally got mine from a friend, so you can ask around. I actually have friends that don't know that I make kombucha, and I was just talking to a friend today and mentioned it, and she's like, "Oh, you make kombucha?" And I was like, "Yes." And if you would like to as well, just personally for a friend, because when you brew your kombucha, this is a really good point. I had mentioned this earlier in the presentation that SCOBY is used to brew used in that fermentation process. That's what ferments your sweetened tea. And I also mentioned that in that slide earlier that it also produces a SCOBY. So once you do this, after that first fermentation, you're going to have your original SCOBY. You'll have your tea that is now fermented and now that kombucha, and you'll have a second SCOBY. Another one will grow in there. So, yes, we're gonna.
We have a couple of other excellent questions, and if the
Okay.
askers would like to ask them, they may, otherwise I will say them. First question is, do you ferment the whole gallon of sweetened tea? And I think the answer to that is yes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And
just wanted to
Oh,
add, if you
yes,
don't
please.
want a whole gallon of kombucha all the time, I'm the only person in my household that drinks it. You can just scale the recipe down. So I make about 3 cups every, you know, week or two, depending on how hot the kitchen is. And that's it. I bottle one bottle and I drink it across the week or week and a half or two, and then I make an, and then I just start over.
great idea for the small batch. Next question is there a certain brand of tea that you use? And I guess I'd modify to that to say, what kind of tea should you use? Because we don't recommend particular brands.
That's correct. We don't endorse or oppose any particular brands. We do. I personally use black tea. I have found that black tea works best. So in terms of the green tea or the black tea, you'll find the recipe that we provide you after you take your survey at the end of the Zoom meeting. The recipe will say green or black tea. I have found that black tea has a very good fermentation results and flavor. Marina, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say yes. The standard kombucha recipe is black tea. It can be Lipton. Sorry, we don't endorse brands, but it can just be just any
Any?
old English breakfast trashy whatever black tea you can find is fine. You can train scobies to like green tea, but it is a different thing and it can be more delicate. What you'd want to avoid are the flavored teas. So don't say, oh, I really love the idea of the orange, hibiscus tea or I want the chai tea or all, don't do Earl Grey. Anything with oils or with other flavorings can interfere with the fermentation process. So what you want to do is wait and do that in your second ferment. I'll talk about adding flavors later, but just, your plain black tea, and it can be loose or in bags.
Great question. And Nina, any other questions? Oops, go ahead. Sorry. Could you go ahead and unmute, Nina? There you go.
Did unmute and somebody muted me.
Sir.
Okay, yeah, so we have two more questions and then we'll move on to the next topic. Question was, I have a SCOBY that is 5 years old. Can I still use it? She looks healthy. Now, I don't have any comment on that, but do either of our presenters have any thoughts on that question?
The answer is maybe. I mean, if it's in liquid, I mean, it's probably kind of starving. But the one I started with, my sister had terribly mistreated and had stuffed into the back of her refrigerator for years, and I got it to revive and do okay. You don't actually put kombucha that you want to keep alive in the refrigerator. I mean, once you've made it into the drink and you're ready to go, and you want to stop the fermentation process, you can put it in the fridge. But generally, you don't put things in the fridge while you're making kombucha. And the person who said, how do I keep this thing alive, the whole time? If you give it some fresh, sweet tea periodically, that's all it wants. There's a whole complicated thing about SCOBY hotels if you go look on the web and stuff. And basically all they're doing is just kind of making a little bit more kombucha all the time. They're just giving it fresh food. So you might be able to get away with it.
Okay, so that answers one of our other questions, which was how do you keep the SCOBY alive if you don't want to keep making kombucha? And one of our participants also contributed the comment that most SCOBYs, if you get them from somebody, I guess, or buy them, they do come with the liquid kombucha tea that you can use as part of the process. Okay, shall we move on to topic 2? Thank you for all those great questions.
See, someone
Oh,
has a hand
oh,
up.
there is a hand up. Yes,
Okay.
Susie.
So that was me that asked. They were very generous. The gentleman gave us the liquid and the SCOBY, and I made it. And it's not something I want to do all the time because, like Marina said, I'm one person here. So when you said you can keep it a long time, how often would you give it some sugar? And do you just keep it at room temperature somewhere on the counter?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to get pretty vinegary. And so I'd probably essentially you're making fresh kombucha and throwing out some of the old stuff. It needs both the tea and the sugar for food.
So
The
every now and then you give it a cup of sweetened tea, dump out a little, give it some new sweetened,
Yeah, and I'd probably just dump out,
most of it.
more of it. I mean, there is a way of doing continuous brew where you'll take out like about a third of it and add some more and just keep it going the whole time. Um, but I think it's just probably simpler to just, take out the SCOBY. If it's gotten too big and thick, you're just going to keep the lightest, sort of whitest part on top, and then give it a little bit of starter from what's there, and just give it a new batch of fresh sweetened tea.
Well, my colleague was so happy to get it because she didn't have one.
Well,
So
there you go. And then you can just
bring
get some
some
back
from
from
her.
her. I mean, they
Thank you.
multiply like
There is
rabbits.
one more
Yeah.
hand. There is one more hand up, which is Claudia, if you don't mind. Claudia, do you have a quick question?
I have a quick question because I know nothing about kombucha. Um, Interested in getting involved in it, but I see store-bought kombucha. So can you buy store-bought kombucha and use whatever's in there in the homemade one, or do you have to buy special SCOBY and special liquid?
You may be able to get away with getting one to kickstart from store-bought kombucha. What you want to make sure you're doing is not buying super pasteurized kombucha, because it's all, they've flavored it and they've made it great, and then they've killed everything, and so you're not going to get a ferment out of it. The other thing is I'd probably stay away from stuff that's sort of wildly flavored. If you can, the plainest thing that you can find probably from sort of an organic or sort of, more health food oriented store, you might be able to get that to kickstart again. It'll be pretty clear if you've got a new SCOBY forming. You'll see it. It's going to be there. It's going to form or not. And if you see little wisps of things starting, that'll tell you you've got something going. You can also sometimes kickstart from using a apple cider vinegar that is the sort of raw, unfiltered vinegar, and that can be used as starter liquid. Again, it's a little bit harder. My suggestion is that, you just go into Nextdoor or Facebook and say, hey, I'm looking for SCOBYs and something, and everyone will just hand you a Tupperware with a piece and some slop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for those great questions. I think we're ready for topic 2.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, our second goal, add more fizz and flavor in a second ferment. Rena's going to share. I'm going to go ahead and stop share so you can see some of her show and tell.
Hey, everyone. Yeah. So I thought this is the easy part. You've made your kombucha when you finish the steps that Monica gave you. And so once you're done and you don't want really the flavor to change, you don't want it to get more acidic or whatever, you can stop the process by basically bottling it and putting it in your fridge. And, literally, I could, I guess I could just throw this in my fridge if I wanted to. I would take away my SCOBY and my next set of kombucha to make my next batch. But I tend to take it and bottle it after this. So if you want it just plain, that's fine. To put it in another bottle, the classic is a flip top, because it's got a nice amount of power to resist what might be additional carbonation forming. You'll notice your kombucha can be a little fizzy, and that's good. And some people like it more. If you don't want to invest in fancy bottles, you can reuse bottles from a fair number of commercial products. We don't endorse any of them, but you might recognize some of the beer bottles and the bottles that you can get just buying other things, and you can save them. Those tend to be easiest. You can actually even use a mason jar. If you do this, it might be a little much to fasten the whole thing down, so you might want to just close it with like a rubber band to give it a little bit of give for fizz. They make special tops for releasing fizz. This is just sort of like my husband used this in making wine or something, but and that would allow again pressure to escape. You don't have to get that fancy. A good old reused screw top bottle of wine will work. Just don't put the cap down super tight, again, you're just allowing a little bit of pressure to release, all super easy. The two things I would just caution you about, one is if you're just using a regular stoppered bottle, you might find that it pops the top and makes a mess in your fridge. Or you can burp them periodically, but it's probably, I would go with a loose screw cap before I did that. The other thing is that square bottles are not as strong as round ones. It's just a physical properties issue. And I will say that the only bottle I've ever had blow up on me was a square bottle. So for what that's worth, I would generally avoid it. So to fill, I've taken my SCOBY and set aside the SCOBY that I want to use again. I've probably thrown out, frankly, part of the oldest part of it or given it to somebody. and I've set aside the little bit of slop I'm going to use to make my next batch. And so everything that's left, I'm ready to now put into the fridge. And I just use a funnel, and this is a stainless steel very fine mesh, and I like to filter my kombucha coming out of the basic bottle because it's got lots of swimmy things in it, which aren't going to hurt you, and some of them will still be in here, and I just pour it in. Right. So if you want to do it plain, that's all you have to do. And then you just stick it in the fridge and you're done. Now, most people, or I would say, I think a lot of people find that half the fun of kombucha is that you get to flavor it and do more fun things. So the purpose of a secondary ferment, and that is going to be giving it a little bit of sugar to let it get more fizzy and sort of keep going. It can be twofold. One is that you want to give a little more fizz. Now, if you don't feel like going for a little more sugar, and a lot of people are like, I don't want to put sugar in it. I'm trying to avoid sugar. Well, it's okay. The little critters are eating the sugar. You don't have to. They're turning it into that nice, sort of acetic acid, flavorful, sharp kombucha taste. And there'll be a tiny bit of sugar in it, but to your taste. But you're not like consuming all of that, sucrose, fructose, et cetera. You can just use seltzer water and dilute your kombucha if you want to, or fill the rest of your bag. I find like for parties, sometimes full straight kombucha is too strong for people, and you can just dilute it with seltzer or with regular water. The other purpose of a secondary ferment, besides getting more fizz, is to give it additional flavors, because we didn't let you use all those fun teas to start with. So how can you flavor a secondary ferment? The standard recipes will tell you can just bottle it with 10 to 20% fruit juice. So, your orange juice, here I just pulled out, some cranberry juice out, anything you might feel like adding, and again, water, seltzer, any flavorings that you might like. I like to actually keep my kombucha pretty strong and concentrated, and I frankly don't really like a lot of fruit juice. So what I tend to do is a lot of flavoring with herbs, fruits, anything I sort of have going in the refrigerator or that's seasonal. So I just went out into the yard, and one of my favorite combos is mint with like strawberries, for example. So I just have washed these. We want to do a little bit of a crush on them to kind of give them a little bit more accessibility. And then, the brilliant tip I discovered the hard way is you want to put it in with the yicky, hard to pull side down. So when you're done with your kombucha and are trying to get the thing out, the leaves are facing in the way that lets you take the dead mint thing out. And so I might put into this bottle a little bit of just a teaspoon or so of plain sugar, because I like some extra fizz. Sometimes I like using honey. You don't use honey for your initial ferments. It's not generally a way to create a robust kombucha, but it's fine on a secondary ferment. Because honey is so thick, I tend to put in a tiny dab in the bottom, and then I put in hot water and dissolve it, just so it has an easier chance to dissolve in the general mixture. So I might put in a little bit of my sugar or honey. I might put in, you know, a mint sprig, and then if I have some fresh blueberries or a strawberry or 2 or 3, slice it up. The more surface area you create, the more infusion of the flavor you'll get. You can use frozen fruit. I still have a bunch of cherries that I pitted and froze just for the purposes of making kombucha, because I really like, you know, cherry kombucha, and they're just sitting in my freezer. Another wonderful freezer thing I love to do is if I have it fresh, ginger is wonderful fresh, but it also tends to get dried up, but I love the flavor of it. So I just buy a big old hunk of ginger, peel it, and then I slice it into these little quarters, and I use them for Chinese cooking, but I also then will slice them into a little julienne and dump that in. It makes a wonderful flavor. My favorite with the ginger pairing would be mango, for example, and I can use dried fruit, maybe, you know, some lemon. My other favorite, and I just went out because it's just the right time to catch it. Here's my lavender. A lavender lemon with honey is just really one of my faves. And again, if you don't have, you know, you can put a squeeze of the lemon juice in, you can put a twist of the zest in. You can have, here's my dried lemon from, you know, when everybody was giving me lemons. So these are my dried peels. Here's a lemon marmalade that I made in the height of lemon season. And that doubles up as my lemon and my sugar and everything. And I can just dump some of that in here and then dissolve it in the kombucha. So that's, you know, there's some other things I don't tend to do as much of, but cinnamon sticks with apple juice, sort of a classic combo, maybe even vanilla extract. Some people suggest, you know, if you want that kind of that palette. Another one of my favorites, dried hibiscus. It makes a beautiful color. This one's actually a little bit of a combo. I was playing around with stuff. This is some hibiscus and a little bit of pea flower powder, because I was playing chemistry and showing the color change when you use a butterfly pea flower powder. So any of that can work. You will have stuff in your bottle then. I find that, you know, if it bothers you, you can just strain it as you pour it into your glass, or you can restrain it, but it just depends on your own tastes. Once you flavor the bottle, you want to leave it out for about a day, depending on how hot your kitchen is, but you're giving it the heat, the added temperature to let it ferment again, and that's giving you your extra fizz. I tend to store them upside down in my drain board, because I find that the solids go up, you know, to mix them around a little bit. When it goes into the fridge, it's obviously going to go back up, and so then it's there, and I just drink it across whatever amount of time I want. So that's a secondary ferment. Super easy, tons of fun. Questions?
We do have a couple of questions. And maybe you mentioned this, or you could answer it again. How long can the secondary ferment last in the fridge? I hope it's okay that I went ahead and asked that question. I didn't know if they.
Sure.
How
How long can it last? I've had them last weeks. I mean, it goes pretty dormant once it's in the fridge. I think you might find it might start getting a little sharper. And if that's unpleasant, you can dilute it. You can add a little bit more sugar or juice, or cut it as you drink it. What else happens? I don't think there's really any, you know, I tend to try not to make much more than I'm going to drink before my next batch laps me, because I just don't want a bunch of it in the fridge unless, you know, I'm proliferating for a party or something. But I would say a couple of weeks is ideal, and a couple of months, I don't think it's going to hurt you. You might find it gets a little floaty. This guy doesn't have any, but you know, I cleaned him up for for this event. It used to have a lot more debris floating around in here, but I went ahead and strained it just to look all dressed up for you. But it might get little wispy solids, which is really just another SCOBY trying to form, despite your refrigerator trying to discourage it. And you can just filter that out.
Okay, our next question is, where do you get dried hibiscus? Hibiscus is a flower, right?
You can buy it, but we grow it. It's a pretty easy thing to put in the garden, and it all comes pretty much at the same time, these big, thick pods. And so you peel the outside flower off of the pod, and then we just dehydrate them and keep them all year. So
Oh, we have a wonderful comment from a participant who says Latino grocery stores have dried hibiscus and it's called jamaica.
oh,
Did I pronounce
nice.
that correctly?
And I think it's high in vitamin C. It makes just a really pretty color.
Okay, and then the next question is, does kombucha contain alcohol? And this participant is recalling that the store-bought one does.
Yes, it does. I think it varies based on sort of, how much it's had to drink in its air and so on. It tends to, I think it's in grocery stores, it has to be under, I want to say it's under 5%, or else they have to file it in the beer section, in the alcohol section. And they're making, quote, hard kombuchas now commercially, on purpose. Your home one will, I think, not be able to reach that on its own, but it will have small amounts of alcohol if that's of concern.
Okay, and the next question is, how much flavoring do we add for the second ferment? If you want to repeat that.
Totally to taste. It's really totally to taste. I do it per bottle by just deciding kind of what I feel like putting in, but I might put, 5 blueberries in, or 2 or 3 strawberries, a teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of honey, a sprig of lemon verbena or something.
Okay, and we have one more question in the Q&A, and then we have a hand up. So the question in Q&A is, how much sugar do you add to the secondary fermentation?
Yeah, again, I think for just like a sort of a standard wine bottle size, maybe try a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon of just regular white sugar. Start with that and see. People's tastes are very different. If you want a little residual sweetness, you might want to put in like a teaspoon and then kick it into the fridge before it's all gone. If you're adding fruit juices, my suggestion would be, unless you like things really sweet, not to add any extra sugar, because you've already got a bunch of sugar in the fruit juice.
Okay, and then Karen has her hand up.
Karen, do you have a question?
Like to unmute and you can ask your question out loud.
Oh, hi. So I did a quick online search on the alcohol content, because we saw one of those food shows where they make it, and when they commercially produce it, it's kind of a problem. They have to kill some of the benefits of kombucha, because in the US it has to have less than 0.5% alcohol in order to be considered non-alcoholic. If it's more than that, then they have to sell it with an alcohol license,
Right.
which is a problem for those companies. So that said, depending on your ferment and how long you do things and how much you feed it, it should have 1 to 2% alcohol, but you can brew it a little bit longer to make hard kombucha. So if alcohol's a problem, just look into that for yourself and make sure that you don't brew it very long, and then consume, of course, responsibly. But I'm glad somebody brought that up, and I just wanted to throw in a few facts in case that's helpful for anybody. Thank you. We're enjoying this, my family and I. This is science class.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Very glad you're enjoying it.
There is a question, is there such a thing as a dangerous SCOBY? But before I get to that, I just want to ask one more question, and that came in the Q&A, and that's just to repeat again or clarify, what do you do with the SCOBY and the reserved liquid after you've fermented it and you've put the kombucha you made in the refrigerator? So what do you do with the SCOBY in between times, if I understand the question correctly?
If I understand it, basically, so this guy is almost ready to go. That is ready to be bottled. I haven't tasted it recently, but I'm guessing. So I'm probably going to pull this top SCOBY, which is the newer one, off, and I literally stick it in my glass measuring cup. I pour off the 1/4 of a cup of the kombucha that I'm going to use to make my next batch in the cup, and then I take the good part of the SCOBY and I stick it in the cup, and that's just sitting there waiting for the next batch that I'm going to make. And then I take the bottom SCOBY and I usually, with clean hands, squeeze it out, and then I throw it in the compost after having spent a very long time trying every possible thing to do with a dead SCOBY to not waste it. I give up. None of them are worth the trouble or the other ingredients you add to them. It's mostly cellulose, and I think not really, anyway. And so I'll just throw that out, and then I just bottle the rest. And if you don't want to make your next batch right away, then just leave your SCOBY sitting, covered in its little liquid, waiting for the next time you're ready to brew your tea and give it to it.
Okay, and so Robin has teed up our topic 3, which is there such thing as a dangerous SCOBY? So we're going to transition to topic 3, and then if we have time for additional questions, we'll catch those at the end.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Marina. I'm just going to go back to our slideshow here. Okay, so that was goal 2. Moving on to our third goal for this evening, to troubleshoot your process or embrace your ugly SCOBY. Okay.
SCOBYs are not necessarily ugly. Let's go to the next slide. So here are some SCOBYs. They're not pretty. We actually had a Facebook contest. If you haven't subscribed to our Master Food Preserver Facebook page, you can do that and see different things. But we did have an ugly SCOBY contest. So one of the useful things here, I think, is you'll see in the first sequence, these are baby SCOBYs forming and getting thicker and darker and kind of more meaty over time. A month is probably longer than I would. It doesn't hurt anything for you to have a month-old SCOBY, but in general, I usually winnow mine every time. Paige, who took this picture, maintains SCOBY hotels with millions and millions of SCOBYs that she, I don't know, gives away as party favors or something. The right side picture was a particularly I tried to find the ugliest side and the sort of lighter, cleaner side of a divided SCOBY. And your SCOBY will, and it doesn't always, by the way, float, nicely right at the top. Sometimes it'll, hang sideways, or it'll do little jellyfish loop-de-loops and strange things. But in general, you get more sort of yeasty deposits and these sort of brown strings and stuff, and that tends to collect on the bottom of your SCOBY, and that's still all okay. Go to the next slide. What you don't want is mold, and I have to say I've never had mold happen, but it certainly can happen. So what you want to do is just recognize your SCOBY. It's generally sort of white to brownish. You saw some of the ranges that are pretty typical in that last slide. It's mainly made out of cellulose. It literally is just it's like rubbery. It's slippery. It's what I kind of imagine, you know, I don't know. It's a strange beast, but it can be super nice and round and flat, and sometimes it can just be bumpy and irregular, and that's all okay. What you don't want to have happen is mold. And as Monica had said earlier, that can be encouraged if it's at too low of a temperature. It's one of the reasons why in general you don't want to just hang out and put scobies in the back of your refrigerator forever, because it might be that it catches mold. So how do you kind of prevent that? You really want to have clean hands and clean equipment whenever you go in to handle anything in your kombucha. It is a fermentation process, and you don't want to be introducing a bunch of other things and risking that. You want to ferment, generally 68, or your kitchen can vary, but just keep an eye on it. If the pH is lower than 4.2, and I know we all just have pH meters in our homes, right? It's when it's fairly acidic. Lower than means that it's on the acid side. And I was just talking to my husband, who's the chemist, and we were actually joking, if you don't have pH strips, and I don't check my pH in this, but a butterfly pea flower powder is pretty hilarious, because if you put it in and it goes to purple or pink, you are down low in the acid range and you're fine. But in general, if you follow these recipes, you're going to have a good, healthy acid level the whole time. Mold, when it forms, if it does, is always going to be above the liquid surface. So all of the crud that's happening underneath that looks ugly is almost surely fine. It'll be on the top side. It's picked it up somewhere from the atmosphere or from something that's unclean. I have never seen green or blue or pink fuzzy things be good. So if you're seeing those, I would get worried about it. Black is probably mold also. But what I want you to look at in this picture is white, because those little white things that you think might look like mold are actually a new baby SCOBY forming. So that opaque white, or sometimes like brown things, can well be your SCOBY forming. And there's a parade of horrible pictures of actual mold on SCOBY, as well as incredibly ugly SCOBYs that are just fine, that you can find on the internet. A variety of, particularly commercial sites, sort of want to reassure you. So if you just type in, moldy SCOBY, you can see parades of pictures of people who've identified good and bad. But odds are you're going to be more squeamish than, because it's just this weird new thing to play with. But do keep an eye on it. Dry mold above the surface patches. If you're in doubt, throw it out and you can start again. Next slide. I think I already mentioned the brown stringy stuff. So this is what this guy looked like before I cleaned him up for the program. And there's just spent yeast. The product of the fermentation will kick off all sorts of residue, and it can collect in your fermentation vessel, and it won't hurt you. It's one of the things you can filter out when you're doing your secondary bottling. I actually wonder sometimes if it helps everything. I don't re-sterilize and super clean my vessel every time. In fact, I usually like to let it kind of collect its stuff, because I think that's all just sort of more SCOBY-esque activity. And then I just do my filtering when I do my secondary ferment. And I think that's it for the start of troubleshooting, but we'll try to answer any questions.
Okay, we do have a question. And that is the question of, is it okay to be doing fermented veggies in the kitchen and also be making kombucha? Would you like to field that one? Or my only comment on that is that the one fermented veggie recipe that we teach is the sauerkraut. So just to clarify that, that's what the UCANR MF
Well,
program does.
I mean, you have stuff floating around in the air. One of the reasons why you're covering this is, to keep out fruit flies, for one thing. But also you do want to kind of shelter any ferment that you're doing from things that aren't intentional. So in the same way that, I don't like put my sourdough starter, right by the sauerkraut. I I don't think a lot about, I mean, we did have sauerkraut going actually, this whole last month right next to him. So I think it's probably usually okay.
Yes, and did that answer your question, Maria, who asked that question?
Marla.
Oh, I beg your pardon, Marla.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly can be the case that things can, cross critters can happen, and that might lead to unintentional, tastes and results. So in general, I think keeping things covered and
I have read, but I don't have a source on this, that you might not want to be doing yogurt at exactly the right time, the same time,
Hmm.
in the same place. But I don't have any more information on that.
more questions.
Okay. So we have some, I want to make sure, if there's anybody who did not get the link to the recipe, you will be getting it after the survey, if I understand correctly. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll be providing just a written copy of it, as
That will be
PDF or
emailed to
Word.
participants.
Mhm.
Okay.
We have just a couple more minutes. Any other questions? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and continue here. Oh, I have Ingrid. Ingrid, would you like to?
Sorry. Hi, I
Uh-huh.
was trying to unmute. Hi, I have a quick
Yeah.
question. I came in a little late, so I apologize. Can you use syrups, like concentrated syrups, like sometimes in the European, Middle Eastern stores, like as there's a pomegranate molasses or an elderflower
Yeah.
in your kombuchas?
Yeah, secondary ferment. You don't want to
Secondary.
do any of the fancy flavoring in the first round, but you can pretty much do anything
In the
it,
second ferment. Yeah.
the
Mhm.
second ferment, all you're doing is by giving it something sweet, you're giving it more food for fizz, and anything else you're doing is really about flavoring. So that's
And
fine. I've used pomegranate molasses, for example.
So some of them have added sugar and others don't. Which one do you prefer? Like I always buy the one without added sugar because it's a pretty sweet fruit. What do you use?
I tend to lean toward less sugar, and so I tend to use whole fruit when I can, and if I can't, I'll just put a splash of something, or a dab of something in,
Mhm.
and if it's already got extra sugar in it, I tend to stop there. But
Excellent.
again, it's all to taste. And
Thank you.
if you want something to be super sweet, you can put in your artificial sweeteners at the secondary ferment stage. You're
Well,
not going to get
I'm
chemical
in the
from it.
same line with you. No sugar, less sugar is better for me.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you.
But if you want the fizz, you want a little bit of food for the, for the fermentation.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Just to add to that, I want to mention because your SCOBY multiplies and once you get it going, so if you take that plunge and start making it, you can really have fun with it. Because if that round doesn't work out with that flavoring and maybe you don't want to go that route, you can make another batch and you can keep it going and have fun with it.
Yeah, no batch is really ever the same, at least in our household.
Nina, are there any other questions?
Just a question about how to get a SCOBY. Can you buy them from the store? And my understanding is that they can be bought online. I don't know about any particular stores, and you know, but we've all been able to find one by asking around.
Yeah, I
Found
think
a friend who could give you one.
a health food store might have some.
And Letitia has one final question before we do our final slides, and that's about concentrated juice, which could be used as a flavoring, right?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. A little scoop of, frozen lemonade or orange juice or.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. We want to mind your time, so we will go on to our final closing slides.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have some free upcoming online programs. You'll have these slides, and so you have that QR code that will take you to our events page. We have a couple of events coming up. We have our Canning Basics 2, low acid canning. It will be online, and the date is to be determined, so keep on the lookout for that. We also have our monthly Ask a Master Food Preserver, and that will be Wednesday, May 7th from 7 to 8 p.m. So you can come with your questions and get them answered. Okay, so this will be posted online, and you can also check out our other past events. So, our Fermentation 1 and many other classes. So, the recordings can be found here on this website, and you can use this QR code. Additional learning opportunities, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter. We share recipes and stories and informative articles. Here's our website there, and again, our QR code there to the right. To the left here, we have our Facebook, the UCMFP, and we have our Instagram page. You can join us and find out additional information there. And we also have a help desk. You can submit some questions too if you have questions along the way and you're in between your Ask a MFP presentations, our live Q&As, then you can submit questions there. And you can even join us and you can be a master food preserver yourself. And that last link there at the bottom will guide you to our webpage with more information on becoming an MFP. Okay. So, post-event survey, we need your input. When this Zoom ends, a brief survey will pop up in your browser. Please complete it and we'll send you these slides and resource handout. I'll have the recipe for you. Your feedback is critical to improve the quality of our events and fulfill our grant. So thank you so much for taking the time to fill that out and for your interest in joining tonight. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of your questions and happy fermenting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.